Usually when we got calls at Life Dynamics, the woman's situation was settled. She was either recovering from her injuries or she was dead. That wasn't the case with Carolina. This is Christina with the Sisyphean Journal, and today is February 5th. One of the major projects at Life Dynamics is litigation support for attorneys representing abortion-injured women or the families of women who have been killed. Families would call us asking for a referral to an attorney, or the attorneys would call us asking for help. But usually the situation was resolved. The woman was either injured and getting treatment to move on with her life, or she'd already died by the time the attorney got to us. But this was a case where everything was still up in the air. It was December of 1995, late December, and we got a call from an attorney in Florida that a 20-year-old woman with 2 small children was in the hospital with sepsis after an abortion. It was bad. They weren't sure she was going to make it. We kept getting calls. Tom would take the calls because he was the one that coordinated with the attorneys. And Tom would relay the information to Mona, and Mona would come relay the information to me, and we would pray. The woman's fingers and feet were turning black with gangrene. The doctors were trying to figure out what to do. They had to amputate her feet, but she was so sick. They weren't sure she'd even survive the surgery. And day after day, we got updates. Is she well enough that they can do the surgery? And you're there like, you don't want this woman to lose her legs, but you don't want her to lose her life. And we wondered, was she conscious? Was she unconscious? We didn't know. We wondered if her children knew what was going on. And we got the call that they'd had to amputate her legs. We weren't sure. We think she'd lost her fingers as well. And again, we wondered, is Daddy bringing the children into the hospital? Are they wondering where Mommy's legs are? And we wondered which was worse, being in the hospital, seeing Mommy like that, or Mommy's missing and Daddy's worried and they have no idea what's happening. And we prayed for her to get better, to go home to her children, to learn to walk on prosthetics. Week after week after week, we got updates from the attorney, and Carolina finally died on February 5th. And it was after that we started to learn the details of the whole story. And after that point, I wasn't involved, so I wasn't getting more updates. Tom was the one working with the lawyer. The rest of what I learned from news coverage. So Carolina was a part-time waitress who had come to the United States as a refugee from Nicaragua when she was 13. In 1995, she married Jose Lenarte, who had also come to the U.S. from Nicaragua as a teenager. He was 25 years old at the time that his wife died. He was a stepdad to her 2 children, 5-year-old Alba and 2-year-old Darwin. When they found out that Carolina was pregnant, Jose told the paper, at first they were really excited. They were happy to have a baby together. But Jose just loaded trucks for a living, and Carolina was a part-time waitress, and she was worried about their finances, and she started talking about an abortion. But Jose didn't want to go that route. Without telling him, Carolina asked a friend to drive her to Mabor Medical Center in Miami's Little Havana neighborhood. And what's interesting is, though it was in Little Havana and they catered to a Spanish-speaking clientele, all of their paperwork was in English. The the patients couldn't understand any of it unless, unlike Carolina, they had learned to read English. So the friend drove Carolina to Maber Medical Center on December 19th. And the evening after her abortion, Carolina was staggering around the apartment. She couldn't walk properly. She was doubled over with pain in her chest and abdomen. She called the clinic for help a couple of times over the ensuing days, but she'd leave messages on the answering machine and nobody'd return her calls. And sometimes they would answer, but they'd hang up on her. So finally, on December 21st, she could hardly breathe, so her family called 911. She arrived at the emergency room of Jackson Memorial Hospital already in septic shock. Whoever had done the abortion had poked 2 holes in her uterus. The doctors performed an emergency hysterectomy, moved her to the intensive care unit, and put her on a respirator. And they pumped her full of antibiotics as the gangrene set in. So Carolina's relatives cared for the children as her husband spent as much time at the hospital as he could. The newspaper started covering it while Carolina was still sick. And he told the Miami Herald, "I can't sleep. I try to take my mind off it, but it's impossible." Carolina's 21st birthday came and went as she lay in the ICU. And as the doctors finally amputated her lower legs. But again, like I said, it didn't help, and she died February 5th. The family held a press conference. Jose said, "I have lost the love of my life. I am heartbroken. They have taken my happiness away." And he remained bewildered about the abortion. "We wanted a child. That's all we talked about. We even bought clothes for the baby." When the attorney who had called us tried to contact the clinic to get medical records, he couldn't get through to anybody. They shuttered the place down and lay low. Property records showed that they owned a house, but when the reporters called, the people who answered the phone said that the owners didn't live there. Now we get to we've seen what's tragic. Now we're going to look at what's absolutely disgusting. Maber Medical Center first started operating as an abortion clinic sometime in the 1980s without having a license. They got caught operating without a license in 1991. So they called and they got a license, no problem. And after that, they passed every inspection. They passed every inspection because I've talked about it before. Remember, I've talked about the Compton car effect in the 1980s with the Dadeland fiasco, where the clinic was filthy. The doctors were leaving while the patients were still in recovery and weren't well enough to go home yet. There was blood on the table. The masks had lipstick on from the previous patients. They were selling abortions to women who only thought they were pregnant. A woman died a horrible death. And when legislators tried to pass legislation to tighten clinic regulations, the abortion clinics banded together with the help of the National Abortion Federation and formed the Florida Abortion Council. And they successfully lobbied against any regulation. As Janice Compton Carr, the Florida Abortion Council spokeswoman, put it, I'm not going to remember the quote exactly. In my gut, I am completely aghast at what goes on at that place, but I staunchly oppose any effort to remedy this situation in law. The pro-choice movement, before Carolina ever walked into that clinic, had blocked efforts to keep places like that closed down. Basically, the inspection was just a review of the paperwork. Did the clinic have their license posted? Were they keeping the medical records? Did they have documentation that they had a contract with a medical waste disposal company? Did they have a doctor signing off on the charts? Things like that. They didn't check the quality of the physical premises. They didn't check the equipment. They didn't check the staff training. They didn't actually check anything but paperwork. Abortion rights activists wanted it that way. They had a chance after the Dadeland fiasco to close places like Mabor down so that women like Carolina wouldn't walk trustingly into them. What happened to her, we know where the responsibility lay. And, it's really interesting that it was only the pro-lifers that helped. The pro-lifers had helped in advance by trying to get these clinics inspected, trying to get horrible, seedy, shoddy places closed down, and we were blocked. When the family was left with all these bills, it was pro-lifers at Life Dynamics helping the attorney to try to sue. And I don't know where it ever went. I don't think it went anywhere because I think the owners disappeared. They closed the clinic down. And it was pro-lifers who raised the money for Carolina's funeral and grave and to help Jose to care for the children. It wasn't the pro-choicers who had left her so vulnerable, who'd had an opportunity to stop this from happening and were far more interested in the abortion happening than they were in whether Carolina survived it or not. And one of the other things that really disgusts me about that, one abortion rights activist, a doctor, wrote a letter to the Miami Herald advising women that the way to avoid places like Mabor Medical Center would be to call Planned Parenthood or the National Abortion Federation. And if you followed this channel or the Real Choice blog, you know that going to Planned Parenthood or the National Abortion Federation isn't going to protect you. In fact, what happened to Carolina wasn't that long after National Abortion Federation member Abu Hayat, the butcher of Avenue A, got stopped on his rampaging, hell-raising, oh my God, this man. He provided substandard care to a teenager who ended up dead. He sexually abused his patients. One woman had complications, and because she didn't have money to pay for him to perform the more intense care, he threw her out of the clinic, injured. And the thing that really grabbed the headlines, he ripped the arm off a 32-week unborn baby, starting a technically illegal third trimester abortion. Realized that the baby was still alive and too difficult to dismember, sent the mother home. She went into labor and gave birth to a maimed little girl. Yes, that man was a member of the National Abortion Federation. All of this had taken place just a couple years earlier. And the Miami Herald still put in a little information box telling the readers that if they wanted safe abortion care, they could contact the National Abortion Federation and things like this wouldn't happen. You can't trust these people. You need to red pill on this. If the abortion lobby says it, their number one priority is to protect Abu Hayat. Their number one priority is to protect Mabor Medical Center. Their number one priority is to protect the people who pay them, and the people who pay them are Abu Hayat and Mabor Medical Center and other people who make their living from abortion. If you want to look out for the women, you're either going to have to buck the system or you're going to have to actually become a pro-lifer. And really, I'd rather you stay pro-choice and fix this problem from within, because the pro-lifers can't do anything. Everything we try to do, they're just trying to block access. Access to what? Think about that. Access to what?